Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I would like to share my thoughts on Lying Perfectly Still by Laura Fish. I was sent this book in exchange for review by the publisher Fly on the Wall Press a few months ago, but all of the opinions within this video are my own. And I would like to say that I was pleasantly surprised by this book. In this book we see the character of Kaliwe, who goes to Eswatini, which was formerly the Kingdom of Swaziland, and she goes as a foreign aid worker. The reasons that she is doing this is because she has lost her father, who dies in the beginning of this book, and the grief has left her seeking a sense of identity that she believes she will find by returning to her heritage, where her family originated. And once she arrives, she discovers a level of corruption within the aid community that she did not believe would be there. She has gone there for these very charitable purposes, but also to discover who she is, because I think that although I have not experienced the loss of a parent yet, I have heard many times from other people who have how losing the person who's always been there and known you the longest feels like one of the biggest losses, because it does feel like losing a part of who you are. And so as somebody who is interested in reading about portrayals of grief, it was interesting to see this character whose main motivation seemed to be using her grief to propel her to help others, but also using her grief to travel back to where her father came from, perhaps to understand who her father was more, to perhaps re-establish a connection that she had lost through grief, but also a connection that had slowly been getting lost anyway as her father succumbed to his own grief for the loss of his wife. And that is one of the things that made this already very grim book a bit more difficult, because as a reader you're already empathizing with the character's plight. Grief is an incredibly difficult thing that unfortunately a lot of us have experienced within our own lives. Does lead to making these decisions, and I think that the author captured that sense of character and the way it changes a character incredibly well. Now obviously we've already seen this character go through something of the change in the beginning of the book due to succumbing to their grief. Now we could see that this was coming from the prologue, so the person that Kaliwe is in the beginning of the book really helps to advance her character arc throughout the rest of the book, and really is, I think, what helps her make the decisions that she makes within the novel as a whole. Are particularly villainous characters in here, and one stands out in particular in my mind, and I think even in the readers group questions at the back, let me just check. So yeah, so it mentions this character at the back and asks what our first impression was of them, and did this change as the novel progressed and why. And honestly for me, this didn't, my opinion of this person from when I first saw them on the page did not change to who they were at the end. And this wasn't because there was a lack of character growth within them, and it wasn't because we didn't discover more and more about them as the book went on. It was because what they were saying in the beginning of the book made me feel uneasy, and so I could kind of gauge who they were going to be as the book went on. When these revelations came out, I was very much like, yeah, I recognised who this person was immediately, and I'm glad of that, but also think that it's one of those good signs from the author that they're able to show a character who is seemingly outwardly charitable and good and one of these people, and then ultimately they are doing terrible things. Now this could just be because of my deep-seated distrust towards certain types of characters that I know, and certain types of people that I know personally that have informed the way that I treated this character when I first started reading them. But I could kind of see what their arc was going to be and guess what they were getting up to, and I think that also comes from things that I've seen in the news and I've read in other pieces of fiction. It doesn't make it any less hard-hitting when I'm reading it in this book. One thing that I really want to talk about is towards the end, a scene that almost mirrors a scene from the prologue, because I always love and enjoy when that sort of thing happens within fiction, where something that happens at the beginning informs something that goes on the end. It was only recently that I discovered that apparently this is what you're supposed to do in a lot of your fiction. Apparently something that happens with your main character in the first chapter should inform the way they go about something in the climax. I never knew that. I've been writing for nearly 20 years. 30 years! Oh my Christ! I've been writing for nearly 30 years and I've only just discovered that. Another aspect that I want to talk about from this book, which isn't to do with character and isn't to do with story, because both of those were fantastic, is the descriptions. And for me, that was the bit that just grabbed me immediately when I was reading this book. So this book is told in the present tense for the most part, and this is something that in the past I have found a bit difficult to read. I'm still somebody who likes to see something written in the past tense, but writing this book in the present tense did give it a sense of immediacy and urgency that caused me to read this book a lot faster than I perhaps would have done given the topics that are being discussed within the book. But I found the descriptions within this book mesmerising. Laura Fish has such a skill at crafting descriptions, and I just found myself being enveloped by these sentences and the way that she would describe things. For me, the way that Laura Fish writes description is that it still feels incredibly active whilst crafting this picture within the mind of the reader. And it also, the description is used to give you a sense of who these characters are. And when I mention this, I'm talking about when we're describing their homes. And if you're focusing in on that, you can kind of get a sense of what is important to them. Now, I know that this is what you're supposed to always do within fiction, but for me, within this book, the way that the descriptions were written, I found particularly impressive. And I really liked reading those, and I liked when we got another bit of description. For me, it was when she was describing things such as the sky or everyday things that you don't really think too much about. Like for me, if I was going to say about what the sky looked like when it was dawn, I would just call it a dawn sky. But then Laura Fish has gone and she's mentioned the colour of it, and yeah, it just felt like something that I hadn't seen written before, or as a way of describing something, but it also seemed perfectly right. And I like it when books do that. I've seen it mentioned before, I've mentioned it myself before, how much I like a unique description about something that just feels like it captured the essence of something perfectly. And I think that the author did that tremendously within this book, as well as crafting this book that is so full of incredibly heavy topics. On a craft level, it's such a great read to look at in terms of characterization and plot and brevity. This is an incredibly short book to fit everything in that the author wished to talk about, so that it felt like every single word and every single occurrence that happened within the book mattered to the telling of the story. And I was thoroughly impressed by it, because Lying Perfectly Still by Laura Fish is a tremendous work of fiction, and I'm very glad to have read it. So yes, after hearing my thoughts, do you think that you will go out and read this book? Thank you once again to Fly on the Wall Press for sending this my way. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, because until next time, that is all.